Let's call this meeting to order. Good evening. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So next is public audience. Any member of the public can speak for up to 5 minutes, and if you need more time, I'm always happy to speak with folks after the meeting or any other time by appointment. I'm going to begin with Ferg. And also, I'm asked to remind everyone to please just write your name and your address so we have that. Thank you.
Ferg Jansen, 3 Foxton, West Simsbury. I just want to invite you and anyone else listening to come to Eno Hall tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. It's the unveiling of the hidden sculpture to start the art trail on its way. These brochures are all over town. People have been walking since Friday when they were up without a brochure, but now you can get a map. You can go from Rosedale to Meadows to anywhere around town. So we encourage you all to be there, and thank those of you who have sponsored and supported this so far. We're excited about it, and we think we're going to sell a lot of lunches in Simsbury. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is
the other 4.5 minutes. Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, I can stop timing.
Ferg, could I have one of those?
Sorry?
Could I have one of those? Thank you.
I was wondering what was under the tarp there.
Remiss,
Please,
Thank you.
the kids are excited.
Mr.
Yeah.
Green here and the Gerard family were instrumental in doing 2 10-hour days with a crew of 5 to place those. It was much more difficult than we figured, so we really appreciate the town getting behind us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joan?
Joan Code, 26 Whitcomb Drive. I was very disappointed with the result of the referendum on the budget. Less than 10% of the voters voted for $96,518,369 budget without any guidance from the ineffective Board of Finance. The Board of Education appropriated $23,965,620 for renovations to Henry James that was passed when the approved feasibility study of $200,000 for the Board of Education will be initiated in the next fiscal cycle. Did anyone take into consideration that the enrollment has been reduced over the years and the Board of Education is reviewing a 6.8 grade change for Henry James Junior High School? Why didn't the Board of Education account for the additional overhead costs for the addition? The cost of this project will encumber the taxpayers for 15 years. Nobody questioned why $10,000 cash was appropriated initially from the general fund and was added to the special revenue fund for Simsbury Farms as the golf revenues diminish and costs are increased. When is the town going to contract out the golf course as other towns have done with good results? I would like to inform the Board of Selectmen that I reviewed another piece of Jamie Rabbit's personnel file, as many of his personnel files are scattered throughout the town offices. Jamie Rabbit is Director of Town Planning and Community Development from November 23, 2015 to the present. Another section of the file will be forthcoming as stated in a memo from Town Manager Maria Capriola. It states, quote, in regards to your request for copies of Mr. Rabbit's, quote, work-related performance evaluations, please be advised that we have no performance evaluations for Mr. Rabbit on file. In regards to your request for, quote, complaints from staff regarding inappropriate communication, end quote, the relevant documentation is being reviewed with our Labor Council. We will need additional time to fulfill that portion of your request, end quote. Why have there been no performance evaluations for Jamie Rabbit and his staff? According to the documents I obtained, Jamie Rabbit's available vacation days in 2015-16 was 23.375 days. 2016-17 was 29.875 days. And 2017-18 was 35 days. Why are town employees allowed to accumulate vacation days? When Jamie Rabbit leaves this position, do the taxpayers have to pay for over a month of his salary? I did not see permission from out-of-town trips to conventions, comp time, or any other communications in his second file. The personal action forms only track vacation days, sick days, and personal days. Why the omissions? Why is Jamie Rabbit reimbursed for a restaurant on November 8th, 2017 in Boston, Massachusetts without any backup material? Why do town employees use their personal accounts for purchases that are not exempt from taxes? I am looking forward to reviewing another piece of Jamie Rabbit's file. The Simsbury Performing Arts is building a ticket booth that was exempt from $650 of building permit fees. This money could have been spent on maintenance. It appears that the Little League baseball teams built a concession building at Memorial Park along with other buildings and did not have their building fees exempt. Does Dave Ryan, president of the Simsbury Performing Arts, have a special status in town as a private organization? Why is Dave Ryan, chairman of the Zoning Commission, exempt from disclosing his conflict with the SPAC on his conflicts file that was submitted to the town clerk? Recently, my podiatrist, Dr. DiMatteo, closed his office and notified his patients that all appointments will be canceled, effective immediately. I checked with the Department of Public Health website and found out that DiMatteo surrendered his license. After submitting a Freedom of Information request to the Department of Public Health, I received my request documents and reviewed the allegations against DiMatteo. The report states, quote, the petitioner, name redacted, states that the respondent, Luca DiMatteo, DMP, sexually assaulted her, end quote. Under DPH telephone conversation with the petitioner by telephone, the analysis states, quote, she states that she reported to the Simsbury Police Department. She states that the Simsbury Police Department told her that the respondent admitted to everything, end quote. She is worried that the respondent doing this to other vulnerable patients of his such as her, end quote. On December 6, 2017, Town Attorney DeCrescendo responded to an inquiry by the DPH stating, quote, enclosed, please find the Simsbury Police Department police reports and witness statements in connection with the above referenced investigation. Simsbury requests that your office not publicly disclose the records. You have confirmed in December 1st, 2017 email that your office will not disclose the records if you receive an FOI request, end quote. Town Attorney DeCrescenzo states that, quote, the records were exempt as uncorroborated allegations of a crime, end quote. Why did this Department of Public Health findings corroborate the allegations of the petitioner when the Simsbury Police Department found the allegations uncorroborated? All of my comments will be posted on Simsbury Patch, Twitter at Joan Co., Newsfeed on Facebook, and Simsbury Forum Topics. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan.
And I did it under 5 minutes.
Just under the wire. Thanks, Joan. Anybody else want to speak tonight in public audience? Okay. In that case, we'll move on to, we have one presentation tonight. We're going to start with Ed LaMontagne, Chair of the Aging and Disability Commission. The commission is interested in pursuing a designation from AARP that would make Simsbury an age-friendly community, so this is an opportunity to learn more about that.
Thank you. As you know, the charge of the Aging and Disability Commission per charter is to investigate and assess programs and services in the town of Simsbury for seniors and persons with disabilities. To that end, the commission is interested in the process for establishing the town as an age-friendly community. I believe you have a handout which I had developed along with the commission that gives a brief outline of what that would entail and what it would consist of. I also passed out this evening from the Public Policy Institute at AARP what the current livability score is for the town of Simsbury. And it goes through various metrics that determines that score. To be honest, upon reviewing it, I'm not necessarily in agreement with this score, but the purpose of the commission looking into this is to get boots on the ground and investigate each of these areas to come up with probably a more appropriate score.
This process is a long-term process. We're looking at anywhere from up to 4 to 5 years to do this. We are at the initial step. The initial step being to obtain the political commitment of the community's elected officials. And then once that is done, we would organize stakeholders, conduct assessments, and establish an advisory committee that would incorporate seniors from the community. That process alone could take 1 to 2 years in doing that. Our commission meets 9 months out of the year. It is one of the larger commissions in town. We have 16 members, 3 liaisons, so we certainly have the person power to get this work done, along with assistance from the town if need be. So when we look at this, what's the purpose? So we already know that currently there's 1 in 3 Americans is age 50 or older. By 2030, we're looking at 1 out of every 5 people in the U.S. will be 65 or older. We know that data is accurate in that because we went through this when we were looking at the development of a new senior center for the town. And we looked at those parameters. So as the U.S. population ages, people stay healthy and active longer, communities need to adapt to that. So what this process, again, is that, along with the AARP, the World Health Organization, so this isn't a localized, it's not a community-based program, it's a national as well as an international process whose intent basically is to improve the age friendliness of the community. And our intent is to basically take a look at this. And as I mentioned, it's a long-term process, but the commission felt it was important that at least we initiated the process to look at it. Some of the issues that we may not know are, which Maria had brought up previously, is what types of staff time would be incorporated into this. Is there any costs? AARP does offer grant opportunities to assist with this process. We have been in contact with Tia Murphy from the Connecticut AARP office. She would be our liaison to this. We also have a contact at the National AARP organization that would provide us assistance from the national level. So what we look at, as was indicated in the handout, is there's 8 domains of livability: outdoor spaces, buildings, transportation, which we know from past experience has always been an issue here in town. Housing, you all know that I'm involved with housing, and certainly is an area of which that I personally feel that is something that we need to look at. Social participation. I think a lot of respect and social inclusions, a lot of these, we do have a good resource, and the seniors in town, those are, I think we get high marks on for that. And as the senior center will attest to in social services, that, that is probably one of the higher areas. Civic participation, employment, communication, information, community support, and health services. According to the metrics and the data that I had passed out, the areas that came out lowest on the scale were housing, health, transportation are the 3 lowest areas. Engagement, environment were the highest of those areas. So what we would do going forward would be to, and again, being a long-term process, would be to look at those areas where the greater need is and investigate how we would investigate those areas and move forward, understanding that the process is to look at all these areas and come up with a plan for the 5 years down the road. But I think from talking to the commission, one of our thoughts was that we would take maybe one of these livability areas, concentrate on it specifically, and generate a report on that, and then move to the next one and down the line. So what I'm here for this evening is, again, as I mentioned, the first step is to obtain a commitment from you all, the elected officials, for the commission to go forward with this process. And obviously, we would keep you updated as we go forward with this program.
Ed, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I wanted to understand, is the benefit of doing this sort of the journey more than the destination? And what I mean by that is, it sounds like this is about identifying current gaps for, being a senior in Simsbury. And then it sounds like over the course of those 5 years, the work would be addressing those gaps. Am I understanding that right?
Yes, correct. So currently, there's only 2 other towns, Greenwich and Newtown, that have this designation. We proceed with it. We would only be the 3rd town in Connecticut that would have this process and this designation. Be right up there with bike-friendly community.
Yeah.
So,
Do others have questions?
Well, I was going to say, we do tend to focus on the specific things like being a bike-friendly community, and that's great. We put a lot of emphasis on our wonderful education system, and lots of people benefit from that. But I personally feel like this is an area that, gets overlooked, because unless we're talking about the new senior center, we don't talk about it a lot, particularly housing options. Transportation is an area that gets a lot of focus by the people who need it, but those are not always the people with the loudest voice. And it's a significant drawback to providing some of the services that we would like to provide through social services, even the library. People who do not drive any longer have a very difficult time getting around this area. And we all know that, and we work on dial-a-ride and other things, but those assets are limited, and fairly severely limited. So I feel like there's a value as part of our economic development, as part of our community development, to embrace this. I mean, it comes up in all sorts of little ways, like the sidewalks and the bricks and the, those things that we don't tend to focus on. If you're healthy and able-bodied, you don't look down at your feet and see what kind of surface you're walking on. But as you age, you need to do that. And we should, as policymakers, should embrace that, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Cheryl. Mike?
And one of the things I was just actually thinking about is almost thinking outside the box of how does, for instance, housing. I don't think that we should just focus on senior housing, but be open to, for lack of a better term, in-law apartments, and how to keep people in town and make it more inclusive. Because I personally feel that's a big part of it. And not that my kids necessarily are going to want me around, but they may not have a choice. But I honestly think that's a big part of it, and it becomes part of the fabric. And years ago, that's the way the small towns were.
Well, interestingly, Mike, one of the things that we talk about with this plan is walkability and accessibility to town center. We have a lot of apartments that are being built, but at this point, none of them are in the town center. And you need transportation to get from those residences up to the town center. And I know, because I worked on the charrette back years ago, and that was one of the things that we talked about from the commission, was to ensure that there's some type of housing in the center of town to improve that walkability, so that seniors do have that potential. They could walk into the center of town and take advantage of it. So.
Yeah.
I think we heard that even with the, the Ojakian, Collins, the MS housing. They're like, well, the housing is great, but we have absolutely no way to get to any of the wonderful things that happen. We have all these great concerts, we have all these, festivals and, flea markets. And for somebody who doesn't drive, there is no way to get there unless you're, hiring an expensive taxi.
Yeah.
Which is not always the most economical way to get around. And we have heard that from constituents who have taken advantage of the wonderful housing we have available, and have all of a sudden found, I think one woman said, to you, I think, Maria, she was stuck. She felt like she was stuck. And that's telling.
I'm sorry, maybe you mentioned this initially, but just some clarity. So this is a bit of I consider this sort of an audit of the town. And so clearly, this is helping us because there's some deficiencies here that we all need to work on. And I love your plan of picking one or whichever it is and championing that and seeing it through and finding success. Certainly, this is something that AARP, the organization, is doing on behalf of its interested members and such. Is this also something that is, right now, this is not a marketing tool, a score like this. But is it something that towns strive to have as essentially a marketing tool that they can brand their town with, to have this livability index?
They certainly can. I think it lends itself to being able to market it to that end, to seniors who are looking to either stay in town or move into town. Speaking from a housing authority perspective, a lot of our family members are bringing their mothers and fathers into town because they want to be closer to them. We offer one aspect of affordable housing. There's many other types of affordable housing, so-called affordable housing in town. So I think by virtue of making it age-friendly community, people are going to look at this and say, well, if I'm going to bring mom and dad up, not only to live, but they could avail themselves to the other resources that the town has to offer.
I was thinking of it, just making a correlation of if you ever go onto real estate websites, and they have the great, right now, the sort of great schools owns the market of marketing school, the grading of towns and their school systems, and I think that's something that people clearly focus on immediately when they go on there. And I can see that this being the same type of tool as well.
I think you're right.
And seeing as we're talking about, you've already mentioned it, we're talking about economic development right now, it kind of all connects together. The hierarchical pinnacle is still providing the best services, but these all cascade, these are all great side effects, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
other thoughts or questions for Ed? So I think we're getting some good policy direction tonight. There's a lot of interest in this on this board. There are some questions I know that we have before something committing to this, specifically around the amount of town resources that would be required. So I would say once we have those questions answered, let's have this conversation and then be able to give Maria the direction she would need to be able to write that letter.
Okay.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ed.
We are going to move on to the first Selectmen's report and the town manager's report, and there's a lot going on right now, and I just want to know, this is like the Cliff Notes version. There's a more in-depth version that will be emailed out, I believe, tomorrow. But I first wanted to begin by congratulating Nick Bolter, who was sworn in this afternoon as Simsbury's next police chief. While he's new to the role, Chief Bolter is hardly new to the community. He's served this town for more than 19 years, and he's held every rank in this department. Memorial Day is May 28th, and this year is the 100th anniversary of Simsbury's Memorial Day Parade. The Tariffville Parade marches up Winthrop Street, starting at 9 a.m., and the Simsbury Parade marches along Hot Meadow, starting at 1:30. You've probably noticed some new residents around town of the statue variety. Tomorrow is the official opening of the Simsbury Art Trail, presented by the Chamber of Commerce. There are numerous events scheduled, and you can learn more at simsburyarttrail.com. Throughout the month of May, also Simsbury celebrates National Bike Month. You can find a full calendar of events at simsbury.bike. One event that's coming up this Friday, May 18th, it's National Bike to Work Day. From 6:30 to 8:30 in the morning, there will be a welcome table along Iron Horse Boulevard. Also, the next Hazardous Waste Collection Day is coming up Saturday, June 9th, from 8 to 1, and that'll be at the Simsbury Public Works Facility on Town Forest Road. Lastly, the Board of Selectmen has formed an Economic Development Work Group to develop an ordinance to create an Economic Development Commission. This morning, we had the opportunity to gather input from members of elected bodies and appointed boards and commissions. The next time we meet, we look forward to hearing from members of the business community who want to provide input, and that meeting will be taking place on May 30th at 7:30 in the morning at Town Hall, and all members of the public are welcome, not just members of the business community. So with that, I'll turn it over to Maria.
Thank you. Good evening. An update on our budget. Following the referendum on May 1st, the Board of Finance set the uniform mill rate for the town for fiscal 18-19 at 36.42 mills. The fire district has not yet approved their budget. That is actually scheduled to be voted on later this evening. If the budget as proposed is adopted, 1.17 mills would be required to support that budget for a combined total mill rate of 37.59 mills for fiscal 18-19. That would be an overall reduction of 2.4 mills from our current mill rate of 39.99 mills. We have received some new information regarding the state-adopted budget, and based on information we are receiving, we are anticipating that we will receive approximately $670,000 more in state revenue than we anticipated and budgeted for. And that would be for the general fund. The increases are primarily attributed to increases in ECS and pilot payments to the town. Our LoSiP number is slightly less than expected, but negligible. We're anticipating that we would receive about $1,900 less than what was budgeted for that. The Water Shortage Ordinance Subcommittee has recently reconvened, and Mike Glidden, Assistant Town Planner, has been assigned to support the work of that committee. Additional assistance is being provided from my office, as well as our Director of Public Works and our Town Engineer. The subcommittee will be meeting tomorrow morning, May 15th, to further discuss potential revisions to the draft ordinance. For departmental news and notes, our library was awarded the 2017 Excellence in Public Library Service Award for libraries serving populations over 15,000. That was received from the Connecticut Library Association at the association's annual conference in April. So congratulations to Lisa and her team on that. And reporting on two of their very successful recent events. They held their volunteer expo on Saturday, April 28th. Over 30 organizations participated with over 250 people attending. Feedback from the participating groups, including the library, is that they have seen an uptick in volunteer interest and applications since the event occurred. So we're happy that that was a success. They also held their second annual Mini Maker Fair on Saturday, May 5th. Over 3,300 people attended, with 51 maker events going on continuously throughout the day. A number of volunteers helped to make that a success, including the Boy Scouts. Also, Public Works staff was very involved with that, community partners, and we're appreciative of the support of our local businesses and the investor angels of the Friends of the Library to help make that event possible. Under Parks and Recreation, on Thursday, May 10th, we held a groundbreaking ceremony at Simsbury Farms for the construction of the 2 new basketball courts that will be constructed there. That project was made possible through a very generous donation by David McElroy and his family. Also participating in the groundbreaking were board member Mike Payne, Director of Culture, Parks and Rec, Jerry Toner, our town engineer, David McElroy, a number of folks from the Culture, Parks and Rec Commission, and some folks from the Friends of Simsbury Farms. The project was identified in one of our master plans. Specifically, it was the master plan that was done in the late 90s for Simsbury Farms. It was noted as a needed amenity for the facility. And this is actually the last major project that was identified in that master plan that needed to be completed. So the contractor has been selected. Construction actually began today, and we are anticipating for that to be completed in late July. Very good news there. And from the town manager's office, we are winding down on our remaining 2 leadership team recruitments. We have interviewed finalists for both of the position of Director of Finance as well as Director of Culture, Parks and Recreation. I do anticipate advancing preferred candidates to the Board of Finance as well as Culture, Parks and Rec Commission and ultimately to you all later this month. So we are making good progress on those recruitments. And under special events, I think First Selectman Wellman did a great job highlighting a number of those. So two that I believe weren't mentioned is that the Simsbury Fire Department will be hosting its annual pancake breakfast for Simsbury seniors on Tuesday, May 22nd. That will be held at their main firehouse here on Hot Meadow Street. There's no charge for the breakfast, but they do ask that folks RSVP, and information about where people can RSVP is included in the report. And lastly, the Friends of the Simsbury Farms is sponsoring a golf tournament that will be held on June 22nd. And all proceeds from that event will be used for enhancements, improvements to Simsbury Farms. And information on that event is included as well. Oh, and Narcan. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you. There is a Narcan training being sponsored by Social Services and Community for Care. That will be held on Wednesday, May 16th from 6 to 8 p.m. That's being held at the Simsbury Public Library. A light supper will be provided. We definitely encourage folks to participate in that particular event. Cheryl, did you have anything you'd like to add on that event?
Only that, it's open to everybody. If you have a family member you're concerned about, if you are a caregiver, if you just want to get trained for your own edification, because unfortunately, we never know when this is going to be needed. This is training that can be valuable to everybody. So I would encourage you, if you are available, to attend. It's one of those things like first aid training, everybody should at least recognize it. And unfortunately, this is part of our first aid now. So I would encourage you to attend.
And if you do attend and you're over 18, you can receive a kit to be able to take to your office or wherever.
Wow.
Find appropriate. Yeah.
So there will actually be kits available, so this is the time to do it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there was, that is going out in my first selectman's report, and I wanted, I made a call a couple weeks ago asking members of this board or members of the public to email me with items that they would want to share, which some people have taken me up on, so please continue to do that. So, without further ado, Selectmen Actions, item A, starting with tax refund requests. Is there a motion effective May 14th, 2018, to approve the presented tax refunds in the amount of $2,085.13 and to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute the tax refunds?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and that vote passes unanimously. Next, before us is a recommendation to extend for 6 months our contract with Clean Harbors. That's the vendor that manages our household hazardous waste collection. That would allow the June and October collections to take place as scheduled. Later this year, if members of this board are supportive, we could consider an RFP. But the question right now is whether to extend the Clean Harbors contract for 6 months. Maria, one question. The new agreement is an increase over the last contract, but you don't expect a significant increase to the town?
Right, that's correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
Has the town received any feedback from the public on the conduct of the hazardous waste collection?
Sure. So we have been incredibly satisfied with the performance of this particular vendor. There was a bit of a timing issue. The last time we awarded this contract, we had piggybacked off of a regional bid that the MDC had done. There was, again, this time around, a bit of a timing issue, and that wasn't fully completed at the time that our contract was coming due. So our thought was that so we do not have a disruption in the service for the remainder of the calendar year, that we simply extend the contract out for the remainder of the calendar year. And then depending upon the outcome of the MDC bid, if we need to issue our own bid, we could do that and then present you with a new contract for a lengthier period of time later this year. We currently are the lead town. We're part of 5 towns that participate in a regional contract. But this fee would be for Simsbury's portion.
And it's already been accounted for in the budget, so there's no
Correct.
financial impact to that. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on this? Okay. Is there a motion effective May 14th, 2018, to authorize Town Manager Maria Capriola to execute the contract extension with Clean Harbors Environmental Services for household hazardous waste collections as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and that passes unanimously. We mentioned this before, but Saturday, June 9th, from 8 to 1 is the next household hazardous waste collection, and that will be at the Department of Public Works on Town Forest Road. Next is the proposed stormwater connection ordinance. So the history here is that the state is requiring towns to adopt a stormwater connection ordinance. As I understand it, it would regulate what goes into our storm drainage system and provide an enforcement mechanism. This is a state mandate. Anything you would add, Maria?
That's correct. So this is part of the ongoing unfunded state mandate from the state regarding stormwater management compliance. Oftentimes you'll hear it referred to as MS4. So we are now being required to have an ordinance in place. Sometimes you might hear this referred to as an ordinance about illicit discharge into the stormwater system. But we are required to have an ordinance in place by July 1st. We did have a model ordinance that was provided to communities that we worked off of. We did make some modifications to that to make sure that we were making the ordinance Simsbury specific where we could, particularly around enforcement, how we might handle that, hearing officers, the appeal process. We did look to a number of our other ordinances, such as wetlands regulations, our blight ordinance, to have, again, some consistency in terms of how we are handling that. So the attached draft ordinance was reviewed by our assistant town planner, our town engineer, as well as our director of public works, with assistance from myself and our deputy town manager. The town attorney has also reviewed this. What we would recommend at this point is that if the Board of Selectmen are comfortable with the language in the draft, that we submit it to public hearing, and that we submit it to public hearing for May 30th to receive public comment on the proposed draft.
Is there any feedback on the draft before we send it to public hearing?
I would say, well, I don't like unfunded mandates philosophically. I think this is a good thing to do, and we kind of need to do it. So I guess reluctantly, I would go along with it, just for that reason.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Well, we really don't have a choice. I mean,
No, we
don't.
There is no choice, we have to, so.
Is there, so we have no choice, is what you're telling me. It's like,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
Mom offers me for dinner tonight. You can
That's
have
right.
tuna fish sandwich or.
But you do
And
get-
you get to pay for it.
Yeah, so, but, I mean, is there a purpose in talking about, I mean, Bob, I mean, is there language to alter or not? Or is it this, so what's the consideration then? I don't-
Sure. So, I mean, there could be minor tweaks to how we designate folks that we want to enforce the ordinance. There could be tweaks to things such as the fines that we proposed. When trying to recommend a fine to you all that we include in the draft language, again, we looked at some of our other ordinances to sort of gauge what might be an appropriate fine for this purpose. So those are some of the types of things that we do have some local control over, again, in terms of who we want to enforce it, how much we want to levy for the fines. In terms of pursuing violators in a civil manner versus going through actual, criminal prosecution. Our intent would be to only use the latter in the most extreme cases. And that's currently how we handle a number of other regulations such as wetlands or blight, is that only in the most extreme cases, and essentially very rarely would we pursue something criminally, and that we would just try to handle this in a civil manner.
So my understanding that the cost to the town would be on the enforcement side.
Correct, right. In extreme cases, again, of where, extensive cleanup was needed, we would have the ability to try and recoup those costs through the court system from the person who had essentially the illicit discharge into the stormwater system. But in terms of MS4, and I know that this is an issue that has been brought to you before, and we talked briefly about during the budgeting process, we're really trying to get a good handle and understanding of these increasing requirements and that burden on us from a staff perspective and what resources are going to be needed. I do anticipate that through our fiscal 19-20 budgeting process, I'll most likely have to come to you with a plan in terms of additional resources that will be needed in order to comply with all of our MS4 requirements. But this is a piece to what is being required of us.
But the town, our citizenry should not be concerned that whatever is encompassed in here is formalizing it from at a state level. We are practicing these types of vigilance and oversight and enforcement, correct?
We will be required to enforce, correct?
We're doing that already, though, right?
I
No,
don't believe
so
so.
there are things out here that
Yeah.
addresses that
Yeah.
so there could be illegal stormwater discharge and we let it go and we don't
Well, we wouldn't have the ability
Police
now,
it?
for example, to levy a fine for that. I mean, certainly if we became aware of it, we would need to address it with the individual, but this would provide a formal mechanism for us to be able to do so.
So they don't necessarily, with the town of Simsbury, see gaps in the way that we are currently providing oversight for these kinds of concerns. We're not being penalized at all.
Oh,
There- no.
no.
No,
All right.
everybody
But I want
everybody
people
has
to be safe and feel good that we're
Yes.
doing the right thing regardless of this
Yes.
being handed down from the state, on high on a piece of paper.
Sure.
Do you have a recommendation as to the fine structure, or?
Sure, we had suggested $100 based on some of our other fines. That's comparable with what we're currently issuing for a blight violation.
Okay.
Yeah, so it sounds like some of those things around the edges of the ordinance would be up
Correct.
for input from the board. Okay.
Or the members of the public through the
Yeah.
public hearing process.
So the
Right.
public hearing would address that also.
Are there any other questions? Okay, in that case, is there a motion to schedule a public hearing for 6 PM at the Board of Selectmen's regular meeting on May 30th of 2018 to solicit public comment regarding the proposed adoption of the Stormwater Connection Ordinance as presented?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that passes unanimously. Okay, next are public gathering permits for 3 2018 events. They include cruising with the Cops Car and Bike Show, the Ethel Walker Trail Run, and Farm to Table Dinners, which are actually 3 separate events, but it's one public gathering permit. These are all annual events that the Board of Selectmen has approved in the past. The permit to the Farm to Table Dinners is contingent on Gifts of Love getting the necessary approvals for food and alcohol,
That's
right?
correct, both. The Health District for the food and zoning for a special exception to serve liquor.
Sure. Okay, so we can handle that one as a separate motion because it'll
Yeah.
be contingent on
Yeah,
those things.
and we've done this before, with other organizations, and I don't foresee any issues on either front for them. And their time frame allows them to get both of those approvals in a timely manner, so they should be okay.
Okay. Anything else you would add on these?
No, as you said, Eric, they're repeat events. There are no major, public safety issues. All have been compliant in the past. I would say great events, number of fundraising events for very good causes. And so, no, we're glad to recommend these to go forward again.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
Jerry, the only one that I've ever heard any comments about is the Ethel Walker Run and safety issues regarding crossing the road, between the 2 Ethel Walker properties.
Right.
Is there going to be any special coverage there by police department, anything like that?
Not that I'm aware of. It wasn't discussed. I think there's a traffic light there. I think that they.
There is.
There is, but it's a lot of people going,
I think there has, when my daughter has run, I think there has been a cruiser there.
Has there?
In the past.
and so
It's not a special duty officer, but they may
I've never
have
actually
something.
seen it, but
Yeah.
it has been mentioned to me that.
It's worthwhile.
that there was
Yeah, it's a
a,
fast road, I think it would be.
Yeah.
It's worthwhile, and the
Yeah.
event is growing in popularity, so maybe it's something we do run, no pun intended, run by them.
so the police department is aware of this?
Yeah, oh
or-
yeah, absolutely, yeah. They have, in this case, Tom Sheehan was serving.
Will be
on the committee, yeah, so they're
Okay,
well aware
great,
of it.
thank
Okay.
you.
Is the participants in the run, and I've done that myself, one year when it was raining and kind of crazy, but it's, do participants sign something so that the town wouldn't be liable should someone hurt themselves?
They provide a certificate of insurance to us.
Okay.
To protect the town, since they do use town property in the event, yeah.
Are you not confident in your running capabilities?
I thought I was going to twist something, I'm just saying, but it's a great event, and I hope they raise a ton of money. But it was like raining at 55 degrees in October, it was great. Anyway, we'll hope for better weather this year. All right, so is there a motion effective May 14th, 2018, to approve the public gathering applications as presented for the Simsbury Police Union's Cruisin' with the Cops Car and Bike Show and the Connecticut Children Medical Center Foundation's Buy for the Kids Ethel Walker Trail Run, and to authorize the issuance of those public gathering permits?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Can I have a motion effective May 14th, 2018, to approve the public gathering application as presented for the Gifts of Love farm-to-table dinners and to authorize issuance of the public gathering permit contingent upon the event sponsors receiving final approvals from the Zoning Commission to serve liquor and the Farmington Valley Health District to serve food?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and that passes unanimously. Next is a proposed donation from the Simsbury Meadows Performing Arts Center. Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it. The Performing Arts Center is offering to donate a sign that would go at the entrance of the facility that is valued at approximately $20,000. And I've got a quote from you here from the letter, but since you're here, this is perfect. Could you talk to us a little bit about, what the driving factor is for wanting the new sign?
Sure, absolutely. So right now, Simsbury Meadows Performing Arts Center has these not so aesthetically pleasing wood structures out front that really just aren't in line with town standards. And I know from my own personal standpoint, I'm a girl of aesthetics, and so we want to make sure not only that we meet my wishes, but also that we are in line with all of the town's expectations with regard to aesthetics and zoning and all of that. So having said that, in working with Robin and her department, we took a look at how can we advertise what we need to advertise, but also be in line with town standards. And so we came to the conclusion that we would look at about 4 signs, and Jerry's been helpful as well through Culture Park and Rec. So we'll have one identification sign out front, ideally, that would be in line with all of our other town park signage, and then we would have 3 additional signs that would allow for us to interchangeably, on a schedule, advertise all of our upcoming events. And the interchangeability is really nice because our previous signs didn't really have that, and so you had outdated information, which we absolutely don't want to have. So this will allow us to do that more effectively as people are coming by and seeing what we have to offer.
Wanted to try to understand, is it is it really one sign but 4 components?
I have a mock-up if you'd like
I know,
to see it. Would that be helpful?
Yes, very helpful.
All right.
That'd be awesome.
Sorry, I didn't bring multiple copies because I didn't know I was going to share this with you, but I have a few.
We have versions of that in our packets.
Permissions are approved.
Oh, please.
So this would be in line with all of the Culture Parks and Rec signs that you're going to have now. And that would be an identifier kind of in that median area, assuming all that gets approved. And then this guy here would be our custom advertising sign. So it allows interchangeability. We would have 3 of these, so ideally you could advertise 9 events at one time if you wanted to, or multiple events on one larger scale.
Now, where are those going to go?
So these ideally would go to the north of the main driveway along Iron Horse. So right now, the signs that you see there, the structures are still there, we will remove them, are kind of along the fence line, but
Those ones that look
we
like
would like to
bulletin
kind of move
boards.
them up a bit so that as people come by on the path, they can kind of see them all together with all of our
Is that in
events there.
front of the ticket booth, or?
No, the ticket booth is on the south side of the
Okay,
driveway,
so-
and so it would be on the opposite side of the driveway.
Okay, good, because I was thinking that was getting a little crowded
No,
over
no,
there.
no, it wouldn't all fit there.
Yeah.
And then the nice thing too is when we're off season, we would just have a plain logo in the back, so if we don't have any content, at least it's still aesthetically pleasing.
So those are going to be totally new structures, so there's nothing there
Correct.
where they are now.
Well, we have to remove what's there right now.
Those ones that-
But they will be totally new. Correct.
Great, thank you.
Do you wanna do
How
this?
big are those?
So these accommodate a 4-foot by 8-foot insert. So they're basically comparable to what we've had prior, just much nicer looking.
That will block sort of the view of the field from the bike path area, or?
Not exactly.
Be perpendicular to the bike path, really.
No, so
Yeah.
the town sign would be perpendicular on that little island,
Yeah.
and then these would be kind of parallel. So as people are coming by or driving by, they can kind of see what's going
You
on.
mean the
Oh,
island?
I see what you
The
mean.
island, you don't mean out on Iron Horse, you mean the
No, I mean, the
entrance way, there's an
entrance
exit. and
towards
exit.
Rotary Park there, coming into the venue parking lot.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
And you
Gotcha.
can have those.
thank you.
You're
All
welcome.
right. Any other questions for Missy? Okay. Is there a motion effective May 14th, 2018, to accept the 4 sign structure donations from the Simsbury Performing Arts Center as presented?
So move, or second.
And any further discussion? All in
Well, I
favor?
was just wondering if this
Yeah.
has to go through planning, or is there any other?
You mentioned you'd spoken to Robin, which is work through that.
Okay,
Right, So,
so everything else is done with approvals, or no?
Correct. So we had worked through the planning department regarding this particular
Okay.
sign
I
donation.
just wanted to be
Okay.
clear on that we're not waiting for anything else. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Any further conversation? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next is a request for temporary liquor permit fee waiver for the Burgers on the Bridge event. Tonight's meeting is reminding me of all the things I'm looking forward to in this town. This is great. The nonprofit that provides support for the care of the Flower Bridge is asking us to waive the fee for a temporary liquor permit for the annual Burgers on the Bridge event. That cost is normally $290. This is something I understand we've done in the past, right? Any other questions or conversation?
I think this is the kind of event that benefits the community, and this is an appropriate use of the fee waiver, once we finally get it more formalized, but I think it's reasonable.
Yeah, I'm excited to get our formal fee waiver policy.
Yeah.
But, for this nonprofit group is raising money to care for a town asset. So it seems like there was an opportunity.
yeah, they're also having the event basically on of the space that they're custodians of. So I think it's part and parcel, rather than us giving up a waiver at a town park for a non-affiliated organization. So,
Right.
although I may hear about this coming at a coming Board of Selectmen meeting, an open audience, that we waive another
Sure,
fee,
yeah.
maybe, but I think this is the right one to waive.
Okay. Any other questions or conversation? All right. Is there a motion effective May 14th, 2018, to approve a temporary liquor permit fee waiver for the old Drake Hill Flower Bridge in the amount of $290 for the 2018 Burgers on the Bridge fundraising event?
So move. I'll second it.
Okay. Any further conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes unanimously. Thank you. Oh, thank you for all of your work.
Thank you.
Thank
It's always beautiful. Yep,
The kids love that spot.
it's always
Okay.
beautiful.
There we go. I like the way you think.
Next is the Neighborhood Assistance Act program proposal. So early this year, the town put out a call for applications as part of the state's Neighborhood Assistance Act program. It's a program that provides a tax credit to businesses that make cash investments in certain community programs that are conducted by tax-exempt or municipal agencies. So we've received 2 applications, one from the Simsbury Grange and a second from the Simsbury Volunteer Ambulance Association. And a public hearing is required before the Board of Selectmen can approve those applications. So that's what we're asked to do. Any questions or conversation on this item? No? Okay. Is there a motion to schedule a public hearing for 6:05 PM at the Board of Selectmen's regular meeting on May 30th of 2018 to solicit public comment regarding potential program applications to the Neighborhood Assistance Act program?
What time was the public hearing we just scheduled for the
So the
others?
previous one was 6.
So we're getting a 5-minute public hearing?
If it's okay to start this one later if we need
Okay.
to, but typically we'll just, if we're doing 2 public
Yeah.
hearings on the same evening, just stagger the start times.
It's fine.
Okay. No, I thought the same thing when I read it first. Any other questions?
You guys are optimists.
And did we vote on that yet? I
Nope,
might have-
not yet.
No,
Oh.
we got to vote on this one.
Did we have a second, right? Good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Did we?
Kathy just needs the maker of the motion.
Oh. Oh,
We
no.
did
I'll make the
that
motion.
Yeah.
So
you made the motion. Can someone second it?
I second it.
Okay, and we all voted unanimously. Perfect. This is what happens when I turn the page too quickly. So this next item is a conversation where we want input from from the board. The Personnel Subcommittee met a couple of weeks ago to discuss the process for conducting performance reviews for the town manager. And as part of that meeting, we also talked about Maria's specific goals. So I asked Chris to lead this conversation.
Sure, and I put a couple things just on PowerPoint so people who are listening can understand where we're going. So tonight, what we're really doing is reviewing the initial proposal on goals and getting feedback on that to finalize that. But we did do this in the context of, if Melissa, you want to move to the next slide, we did do this in the context of the larger performance review process, which is, one, what's the structure to the review document, what's the schedule for the review, and then what the initial goals are. I'm really just going to take 2 minutes to talk about 1 and 2 as an update and get some quick feedback, and then we'll move on to the main show. So we did talk about what are some design values to this process. We want clarity and mutual understanding of expectations. We want to facilitate good conversations. We want a simple, not complex structure. We want to align the timing with the fiscal year. We want to integrate the review with whatever strategic plans emerge, and we want a process that motivates and inspires our town manager, Maria, as an employee, and by extension, when we look at other performance reviews, the same. Moving on, what our process was, if you look at these towns at the bottom, what we did is we looked at the performance review process for Mansfield, the East Hartford Health District, Windsor, South Windsor's staff review, South Windsor's town manager review, and Bloomfield's town manager review. And we also had in our minds, several of us are familiar with what the Simsbury Board of Ed does for the superintendent. So we put a grid together that looked at each of those communities, specifically at what their structure was, what their rating scales were, what their general evaluation attributes are. So that would be, for example, how is this person in terms of leadership? How is this person in terms of communication? And then specific goals, i.e. this town manager has this goal, how are they doing relative to that? So that was really our process. And then moving on, so the proposed structure that we came up with, fairly typical across most of these, but we are zoning in on it on a fairly simple level, is it'll be a category that has general attributes, and we'll provide one rating for that category, as well as an area where people can provide comments, an area where we have goals, and the same, a rating as well as an area for comments, and then an overall rating that gets calculated. Now with that, I just want to show you a sample of some general attributes. So these are the actual attributes that are currently used in Mansfield. We're not proposing that these be the attributes. We have to make a recommendation on it, but these are just samples. So there are 6 of them: organizational management and leadership, fiscal business and management, town council communication and relationship, community and intergovernmental relations, personal and professional traits, and then facilitation of council goals and objectives. What most of these reviews do is they'll have either a statement underneath what these reflect, or they'll have a list of items that you want to consider in terms of evaluating. The structure that we're recommending is, we'll have this attribute, we'll have a definition underneath, but again, there'll be one rating for the overall attribute and an area where people can provide comments. So that's just a sample of what the attributes can look like. And then the next is just a sample of what the actual rating can look like. We coalesced around something that looks generally like this, that we liked. It's a rating that's got outstanding, above expectations, meets expectations, below expectations, and needs improvements. So I'll stop right there, because that's just a sample of what the structure looks like, what attributes can look like, what ratings can look like. Just ask if there's any questions or general comments or feedback on what you've seen so far.
I have one question.
Sure.
For goals, I understood, the town manager providing her own goals.
Yep.
But as far as setting the goals of the Board of Selectmen with regard to the town manager, how do you set those?
Yep. So let's actually save that
save
for the
that?
next slide, which is
Oh, okay,
process.
sorry, all right.
But no, it's a great, that's exactly, that's a great question. So, so with that, unless there's any other questions on
I
this,
had a
Mike?
question. Would we actually be giving points to each of these ratings, or would we just give the rating itself? the words versus an actual point assigned to them.
So I just want to make sure I understand the question. So,
For instance, under general attributes,
Yep.
we would select one of those 5 standards, or the ratings, as
We
you
would.
call them.
You would.
Right, so
We
if
would not
it-
assign points per se, but we would fill in one of those, select one of those ratings.
we would, and an outstanding question is, do we assign points to them to roll them up to a general? But basically, you're right, Mike, what you would do is you would simply say, in this category, I identify, Maria as outstanding.
In my personal opinion, I would prefer not to use points,
Yep.
because you could have somebody that needs improvement in one area, but they're outstanding in something else, and it balances out. And I think, no disrespect, that we really want to encourage people to strive.
Yep.
Yeah.
That makes sense, and that's why you have that overall rating at the end, is to allow it to be placed there, so.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
not to
Chris.
hijack, but having been through more of these that I can count, and maybe being at the lower end of some, no, but when you do roll up to a point total like this, we tend to be sort of very myopic and focus on that, and then lose
What the other-
the sub
Yeah.
categories where we need to hone in and help that associate
Yeah.
bulk up his or her deficiencies, so.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've tended away from those cumulative in the past, I'm
Yeah.
learning from that.
we didn't want the bureaucracy to get in the way of a good conversation. So, so there should be a really good conversation on a general attribute, which hopefully, by both the rating as well as the comments we can get to, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other on structure? All right, so since Cheryl always leads the way, on to number 2 is really what the schedule looks like, and then I'll show you the process, which specifically gets to your point, Cheryl. But what we wanted, basically, we wanted a 2 times a year discussion, a mid-year review, and then a final year-end review, and we really only wanted the formal document and rating at the year end. But what we did want to do with year 1 is have a mid-year review, which we're proposing be in November. We would actually go through the documented process as a way of just testing it to see how it works. Plus, also, we feel, given that Maria is in her first year, it's important to have the richness of that conversation at a 6-month point. So we would do the document, we would have a discussion, and then the full year review in July of 2019, which would be, document, discuss, formal rating, and compensation adjustment. So that would be year 1, and then year 2 going forward would really be a mid-year review, which we're proposing would be in November, which would really more just be a discussion as opposed to the full rating, and then a full year review in June. So that's the schedule, and then let's just take a look at the process.
Before you jump in.
Go ahead.
Again, I really like what you've done, because one of the thoughts that I had is, we don't want to, every 2 years, this board changes, and end up having somebody in December trying to do this.
Right.
We talked about it.
And I think
Exactly.
that is really smart, because I'm making an assumption here, but I assumed you folks had already thought of that, and I think that's a very good idea.
Yeah, Sean was the one who was really a big proponent of making sure that we lined up relative to that issue.
That's right.
Yes.
How deep, maybe, I'm sorry, Chris, maybe you mentioned earlier, how deep will this go into the organization? At any full-time level?
Yep, so right now, we're looking exclusively at the town managers, but we understand that this is beginning to create a process and a culture that will
Sure.
begin to extend out to the full set of employees. So that will be discussed at a later point.
I'm sure you guys discussed this, but does that fit in the budgeting process for, if you're going to discuss compensation issues, it should work its way into the budget discussion, which happens in the beginning of the calendar year,
Yes.
usually. So
We
would there be recommendations at mid-year that we might consider during the budget process, or do you not anticipate that?
There could be. We did talk about, in particular, you may want to, when we do unaffiliated employee increases, that it's not unusual for a town manager to kind of fall into that category. So we do need to line up appropriately with the budget process. Yep.
So there would be sort of an informal recommendation at mid-year.
Very well could be.
And the
Yep.
more formal, because once you get to
Sure.
June, you're after the budget
Yeah.
referendum. So you lose that
Right, the budget process could be setting is very similar to what we do with unaffiliated. There's a budget pool.
Right.
But then the particular outcome in terms of increase would be determined, at the end of the review.
Okay.
But we can go back and explore that more.
Yeah, because you
Yeah.
just don't want a big jump
Yep.
one way or the other.
Yep,
Particularly if you're going to extend this to other
right.
employees of the higher earners would make a difference.
Now, very often what will happen with general employees is you set what the pool is,
Right, yeah.
and then that pool is drawn from relative to,
Yeah.
the specific reviews that come along the way. So we'll take to the next process, making sure that we really line up appropriately with that process. Yeah. So in terms of the process, and this specifically gets to your question, Cheryl, is our thought was that the town manager, Maria, would complete a self-review going into this process. Board members each would complete a review that we would do on SurveyMonkey. If you've never used it, it's a very inexpensive, simple survey process. So basically, each board member would complete the review, and that would feed into a consolidated review. And it's really the town manager's review and that consolidated board review that we would bring into the discussion with Maria. And we didn't stipulate this, but we thought it might be possible that the board might want to meet and have conversations before the formal meeting with Maria.
Sure.
Depending on what that consolidated form looked like. But that was the idea, is that we would be utilizing both within the process. And that enables us to merge Maria's self-perception of her performance and how we respond to that, as well as us being able to provide our perception directly to her. The other piece that we didn't stipulate on here is there was discussion of what's called 360-degree feedback, of occasionally having the people who report to Maria providing feedback. We did stipulate a desire to do that. We kind of left that open-ended, but a design value that we did say is we wanted that to be more part of the development process as opposed to the formal performance review process. So Maria has her leadership council that may be doing some activities, and it's possible that integrating that 360 review into that process, may be more appropriate than this. We kind of leave it open-ended. And I don't know if you have any particular comments on that or not, but.
Sure, just that we had discussed the possibility of doing, or having the direct reports conduct that review about once every 2 years, and that what they would be providing feedback on, the categories would actually be different than the categories that you all rate me on. Again, really geared more at sort of that professional development piece to see, again, from leadership perspective, a supervisory perspective, again, if there are areas of improvement, but again, just sort of a different focus of what folks would be commenting and evaluating on.
Yep. So then, with that, just moving on, the last piece was to begin to scope out specific goals. And so, as you look at the document, I just categorized the global statements, not the specifics, but there's a strategic planning component, human resource, labor relations, economic development, financial management, and special projects. We recognize that when we do some strategic planning process, that may actually alter this document to a degree, but we don't have that right now. But there is as you can see in the document, a fairly extensive list of things that have been identified, either identified for Maria or by default, she's going to have to manage. And so the document that was put together really kind of reflects that current reality, along with a couple of key strategic priorities. So this is really leading up to what was tonight's discussion, which is feedback on the goals. And tonight, we'd like to have a motion and approval of those as the current goals for the town manager.
Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
The other thing I would add is that, for the most part, these are the goals that Maria provided us the other night. We did have some discussion where these were tweaked, but one thing that we did as a group is we prioritized them high, medium, and low, just because there is a lot here, and we just wanted to be able to, provide the feedback on which ones we consider to be the highest priority. So.
It's wonderful, wonderful. If going forward, in the process, it needs adjustment, or the next board sits and says there needs to be some evolution of this living document, does it have to come back in front of the board for those changes to adopt what we are adopting tonight?
I mean, that's what I would
recommend
want,
that.
to be able to give Maria the
Anticipate that.
direction that this is the consensus of the Board of Selectmen.
So it's not necessarily we approve it and then moving forward, it's in the domain of Maria to make the adjustments that she's, so, or whomever the town manager is. So it would come back for review or reformation by this board.
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is something we could amend any time as priorities change.
Right.
Well, and goals will change too.
Sure,
depending on what
absolutely.
And I think it's important for us as a board to coalesce around some goals that are achievable, that are, successful for her, and, move the town forward. So I think that's important for us, and I think this process will help us too in goal setting. So, yes, I think we should review this on a regular basis.
Yeah.
I think it's a great discipline when there's a
Exactly.
change to this.
Yeah.
It's being discussed and really agreed to. There's no question later on down the road whether it's something that Maria's going to be evaluated on
Right.
or not. So I think it's a great discipline to be, having
Absolutely.
these conversations as we have these changes, so.
So it'll be exciting to see this once it moves to the deeper layers, adoption and then application deeper, because that's where I think
Yep.
cultural change, but it'll be a huge benefit as to us to be a higher performing organization that we all strive to be, so.
I'm really excited to do some strategic planning, because in reality, we have not done strategic planning as a Board of Selectmen.
Absolutely.
So I think that piece integrated with this is really powerful for us. Yep.
I would really agree with that, Chris, and I think it's going to be really helpful for all of us to decide what that strategic plan will be, which very frankly may change depending on what the state does. That we've already seen, just look at the last two budgets we had to do, the dramatic shift. And through no fault of our own or anyone else in town, didn't have any input to that, and we had to adapt. So I think this is great, guys. Super job.
I just want to add that, Chris, I appreciate your question on, what happens for the rest of the staff. I know one of my own personal reasons of supporting the town manager concept is if you talk with staff, with new leadership is new rules, procedures, policies, strengths, weaknesses, things they know, things they don't know. And very often this process has shifted quite a bit in that process. So stabilizing how we reward, recognize, manage employees, to me, really allows us to take these values that we have and drive them down into the organization. So I really look forward to working with Maria on being able ultimately to look at how we apply this to the rest of the staff, so.
Yeah.
Well, and for us, we're all adapting to the new form of government, and we have to get used to sort of that extra layer, which I think is going to help us, as you said, with strategic planning, because now it's up to you to implement those policy goals, and it's going to force us essentially to articulate what those are.
Yeah.
Whereas before, when we were a completely elected policymaking body, and as well as a management body, those got confused, and, sometimes expediency was the order of the day rather than planning, and I think this is a great opportunity to engage in the planning process, so.
Yeah, so as we move on from this conversation, I want to talk about what that strategic planning process could look like and what folks have in mind. Any other feedback on these in particular?
No, I think that's great.
Good. All right. Is there a motion effective May 14th, 2018 to adopt the town manager's goals for February 2018 through June 2019 as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. That passes unanimously.
Now, Eric, one more thing.
Yes.
I think since Sean's not here, we should do his performance review tonight. What do you-
Excellent,
what's everyone think?
yes. Let's do
I
a
know
practice
Morgan's
run.
proficient.
Let's just do a little practice run.
We can open up to the public.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Can you put Survey Monkey up on the screen? Or will that-
Chris, that's a, this is good stuff, man. This
Yeah,
is
no,
huge
you guys did a
leadership.
great job
Kudos.
with that.
Well, the personnel, and Maria brought a lot of, again, she just brought a lot of models that we took a look at and picked the best. So thank you, Chris, I appreciate that.
Moving on to appointments and resignations. Make sure I've got the right page. Is there a motion effective May 14th, 2018, to appoint Holly Zonenberg as a member of the Library Building Committee?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
You need to accept the resignation.
Oh, I didn't,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I went out of,
Confusing as
oh, I'm
it is.
sorry, I
Right,
went out of
we
order.
moved ahead to the appointment and
Is
skipped.
that going
the
to create any issues, or are we
I did think so.
good
as
if
long
we,
as-
okay. Is there a motion to accept the resignation of Bridget Herzog as a member of the Library Building Committee, retroactive to April 4th of 2018?
I'll make that motion with our thanks.
Yeah.
Yes,
Thank
second, with our thanks.
Okay, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion effective May 14th, 2018, to appoint Evan Marks, Dennis Kearns, and Liz Peterson as regular members of the Technology Task Force with terms expiring December 2nd, 2019?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, and that passes unanimously. Is there any corrections anyone would propose to the minutes from our April 23rd meeting? No? Okay, then they'll stand as presented. Any liaison and subcommittee reports?
The only thing I wanted to share is this morning we had the Juvenile Review Board, and we will be coming to this board for going to probably have 2 openings shortly.
Oh, okay.
But it's a very interesting board.
Yeah.
A lot different than what I expected when I first got on there, but
Oh,
it's
wow.
good stuff.
Okay.
The Community for Care had a very successful community book discussion last week, which was surprisingly well attended, and the discussion was informative and thoughtful, and I thought, and Chris was there also, if you want to comment on how it went.
Yeah, I think for anyone who wants to have a conversation within their family, with, I would say particularly, individuals that are in the, 5th grade to middle school, this book just provided a great opportunity for
Absolutely.
conversation, so.
And it is available at the library if anybody's interested in reading it.
And I bought it on Kindle for $5, so it
Yeah.
was very inexpensive, yeah.
Yep, it was definitely worth the read, and we had a great discussion. Upcoming Community for Care events, as we mentioned before, we have the Narcan training on Wednesday of this week. Also for Prevention Week, which is this week. We are taping a program on seniors and alcoholism, so look for that to be broadcast on SCTV. We are hoping to have some more book recommendations for families who might be interested in reading further about this, and we will also be taping those recommendations for SCTV, so keep an eye out for that.
I've got one. The Tourism Committee is working on I think it's I would describe it as a vision document, so coming up with some specific actionable things that they could do over the next 2 years to promote tourism in Simsbury. So that's something that I would expect in the summer timeframe that they'd be prepared to share with this group for our feedback. Having said that, they fully understand, too, that we're undergoing this process of reinvigorating the Economic Development Commission and understanding long-term what's tourism's role in interacting with economic development. It's still up in the air, and whatever tourism does has to make sense in the greater context of the economic development picture. But I just wanted to let you know that's something that they are working on and will likely be presenting to this group for their feedback. Any other reports? Great. Anything on the communication front that anybody wanted to discuss?
Can I speak to the carry-in, carry-out policy very
please.
quickly? Okay. This was a very good memo, which basically said, let's, hold the course, continue with the process. It seems to be working, and I appreciated that there was receptivity if any issues emerged to reconsider it. I did this only because everyone knows last summer in particular, there was a fairly active conversation on social media, more oriented towards dissatisfaction, especially with the Rotary Park site. So what I did this morning, just on my way to work, grabbed a cup of coffee, I visited Rotary Park, Curtis Park, and Terriffill Park. And what I saw basically reflects what I think is in this memo. Generally, the parks were clean, but I did see in each of the 3 parks a little bit of what might have been left because there wasn't, garbage receptacle. So at Rotary Park, there were 2 soda bottles right at the entrance. I don't want to stereotype, but I envisioned some teenagers in there and didn't know what to do with their bottles. Over at Curtis Park, around the portable toilet, obviously people who are picking up from their dogs didn't have a garbage can, and there's a bunch of dog remains that are just scattered around the outlet or the outhouse. And then up at Terriffill, which is a baseball park, you can see underneath the stands, there's some couple candy wrappers and stuff. So I think the process is working fairly well. I will say that if we see the level of dissatisfaction during the summer at Rotary Park that we see, I would be an advocate that we should, at that point, take a look at whether we put a garbage can out there. There are a lot of other garbage cans that are around there. There's one that's over at the dog park. There's a bunch of them that are there for the Meadows. And I understand the value of carry in and carry out, but there's another value I have, which is as someone who travels fairly extensively, I tend to go check out parks. And when I'm in a city and I see a park that has garbage, it does not reflect well on the city from my point of view. So just want to, point out, I agree with the recommendation, but I would just kind of raise a little red flag that the one place that seemed to generate some dissatisfaction was Rotary Park. And if that continues, we should just, take a look at it down the road.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this before, when we had our meeting on the 26th, was it? Yes, that, as an example, Chris, in support of what you're saying, down there, Iron Horse is so unique, just because of the multiple events that just sort of flow through in there. So, for example, 2 weeks ago, on a Saturday, we had Simsbury Lacrosse, the girls' youth program, had an all-day jamboree in inclement weather. Now, there was vendors there was food and stuff, but there were hundreds of families coming in and out of there over a 9-hour period with young kids, kids running back and forth. One of the things they marketed was the fact if you had younger kids, you could spend part of your day over by the fields watching your child play, or go over to the Rotary area for the playground. And I just think that type of event is just going to lend to that kind of traffic and that kind of volume. Is you're going to have additional trash there, and that's just kind of the things where we don't plan and foresee, versus one of the more quiet, sort of stately, fixed venue parks in other parts of the town. So, after that event, we did go around, or the youth group did go around, and there was trash receptacles because it was required, but still there was additional volume there because of that kind of event, and it would have tracks there.
Yeah.
Do you think it would help in the marketing of those events if we highlighted the fact that we have a carry-in, carry-out policy? So that people weren't
Oh, no doubt. And
looking for
no doubt, but I just think that's such a unique, when you're talking about a 9-hour, for some people, a 9-hour day with so many different things going on, and leaving and going over and getting your Starbucks because you've been out in the rain for 3 hours to warm up, and then you're sitting there with your Starbucks cup to go. Are you going to bring it to where you have a child running around? So it just that place does just always lend itself to a unique usage, and just it ebbs and flows differently than other parts of town.
Yeah, people coming from out of town. So what's very clear is there are people now who actually will bring garbage bags with them and pick them up. They're in Terriffill Park. I ran into a couple people who I was talking to them about this, and they said they actually, when they walk, they'll walk through the park, and if they see stuff, they pick it up. They do it occasionally. So that, that education is happening. But to Chris's point, if you have an event, a lot of people are coming in out of town, you may have a little bit more of an issue. So.
So I thank Culture Parks and Rec for discussing this at their last meeting, and I know they're going to keep this as a standing agenda item for the next couple of meetings, especially as our parks get more use. So I look forward to anything additional that they would say, and I think I echo the sentiment that I'm hearing, that I don't like the idea of feeling like we're caving into people who are throwing their trash on the ground, but I think it's largely isolated to this one place, and if we were to, it would not be a reversal of the policy entirely, it would be looking at this one area. Again, potentially, I want to see how the summer plays out.
Can I just ask Jerry while he's here, do we do that as part of like the public gathering permits and things like that? Do you highlight the fact that we're carry in, carry out when we?
We do, and one of the things that, it's funny, it came to light with lacrosse tournament, we encourage, and most times the groups are contracting for barrels on their own, particularly, in a case like that where it makes sense, we have a long-term, one-time, longer-term event, it really makes a lot of sense for them to do it. In many, and I believe it, Curtis Park and Soccer Club has, on their own contracted for barrels. So, if that answers your question.
Yeah, I just, like I said, public education is going to be a big part of this, and I think the more we can.
That's really, it's just more of us, letting people know that, and particularly we get a lot of groups that are using the pavilions for picnics, and although we don't charge a fee, a lot of times we'll issue a contract just so everyone knows, or if someone's camping out, we try and make that a standard part of the agreement. We'll even attach the policy so they know what it is.
There's again, lacrosse, that's the world I'm living in now, the baseball fields, but the lacrosse fields up at the Henry James have the porta potty area, so the center of the fence is a break to walk through, there's breaks on either end, and in years past, there had been a big barrel, a green and yellow barrel just on the other side of the porta potty, and it was always full. As you can imagine, on a Saturday or Sunday, amount of kids with their Gatorade bottles, water bottles, it was always full. And so one of the things I thought was, like, how are we going to deal with this? And this year, I've gone up, so a few of us gone up and just policed the area on a Saturday after we're all walking out, and I'm incredibly surprised how little trash is left on the ground. I mean,
great.
the amount of
You
what
can get
was
used to
being generated before and what people are taking away now. So it is working, and it is these isolated little errant pieces that are left behind. And there actually are dog poop bags up there, which is good though. These people aren't leaving them on the field.
All right, any other conversation on carry in, carry out? One thing I wanted to bring up with the referendum on May 1st, I know our turnout was significantly higher than past years, although it's still a very, very small number, just under 10%. One thing that I've been thinking about wanting to do next year is a little more of a formal communication plan around how we're getting the word out. Obviously, the various versions of the budget and depth of the budget are posted on the town website, but is there more that can be done with social media, and even thinking about ideas like doing like a Facebook Live Q&A session? I'm not committing to that right now, and it's a little scary to think about.
You just did, Eric, there you go.
But I'm thinking about
Coming
those kinds
soon.
of things,
Or
coming
will
soon
be.
to a computer near you. It's just, again, an opportunity for people to feel like they really understand what they're voting on. So, that's some things I'm thinking about.
I think that might be a good subject matter for the town managers. I'm just thinking. Sorry.
Nope, I don't think we can, well, and honestly, people who know what's going on and don't go, and some people just don't care and
Yeah.
don't go, and, I was at a newcomers event that day, it was a Friends of the Library event, and I had my I voted sticker on, everybody looked at me, it's like, voting? What are you voting on?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's really pathetic, but it's frustrating, as the people who live with it for months, and then you put it out there and 1,600 people decide to.
You realize it's not all about us?
It's not all about us, and that they really don't care.
It's just their priorities are.
No, they really don't
Changing
care.
shift in society's viewpoints and priorities.
But the good news was it was up almost 30%.
It was
Yeah.
up. It
From
was
what it
up.
has been the last several
Yeah.
years. That part was good.
Yeah.
It is disappointing it's not higher, though.
Okay, anything else on communications? All right, is there a motion to adjourn to executive session with Maria Capriola, Melissa Appleby, Jesse Langer, Mike Glidden,
Right.
to discuss pending claims and litigation about Deepwater Wind appeal?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
That's a tough thing to do, is try to get people.
Yeah, I think it's for the cameras, because they get a reflection.